Welcome to Recap King. In this video, we will explain Celda 211. This movie tells a story of a new prison officer traveling around and being introduced to the prison environment before he works. At the same time, he had an accident in prison caused by the prisoner's rebellion, thus forcing him to disguise himself as a prisoner to survive in prison. Will he survive the prison rebellion? Let's find out in Celda 211. Celda 211 tells a story of a male prison officer, Juan Oliver, who inspects the items being carried and warns that no sharp objects can be brought into the prison. Apparently, Juan was a new prison officer carried around by two other senior officers. The two male officers explained the prison conditions and the rules. That part of the prison was apparently for petty criminals, while dangerous criminals are in other parts of the prison as part of the DSS or designated for special surveillance. The two officers accompanying Juan described a prisoner named Apache. Apparently, Apache was spies for prison officials who provided information about the activities of dangerous prisoners in the DSS. In return, prison officials gave Apache freedom to do many things in prison. Before leaving, one of the officers warned Juan not to trust any inmates in prison. Not long after, the prison roof collapsed and hit Juan, then he was bleeding and lost consciousness. The two officers then took him to an empty prison cell. Cell number 211. The next scene shows one of the prison officers named Armando being interrogated with several other people. Armando tells the incident when Juan had an accident and was taken to cell number 211. Armando did not know why at that time Juan was not immediately taken to the doctor for treatment. Back to the prison scene. This time, a burly man with a tattoo on his neck was called by one of the prison guards. After he was handcuffed, there was a commotion outside the cell, which apparently happened when the prison roof fell on Juan, so the officer came out to check. That's when the big prisoner opened his handcuffs and killed the officer on his return. On the other hand, two other officers took Juan into cell 211 while a commotion broke out outside the cell. The two officers eventually exited, leaving an unconscious Juan alone in the cell. The prisoners apparently staged a rebellion in prison. They broke into cells and even burned down prisons. The officers trying to contain the commotion realized they couldn't do much. The prison leader then ordered another officer to call Mala Madre, who is believed to have led the inmates' rebellion. The prison leader believed that Mala Madre had a hostage, which officers confirmed. Mala Madre was apparently already known to have two hostages. At that time, one of the prisoners found Juan in the cell. Juan is confused and ends up locked in a cell. Outside, prisoners shouted threats at prison officials. One of the prisoners was ordered to guard cell 211, which was occupied by Juan, while he called Mala Madre. Juan, who heard this, tried to get rid of his personal belongings just before being taken out of the cell to meet Mala Madre. On the other hand, officers reported that Juan was in a prison cell. They argue about how to save Juan. Meanwhile, Juan confronts Mala Madre, who is the leader of the prisoners. Juan admits to being a prisoner in cell 211, which he just entered. Mala Madre accepts it after Juan lies about why he bleeds and the crime of murder committed. After that, Mala Madre ordered his right-hand man Apache to destroy all CCTV. The scene changed to the morning before Juan went to prison for his first day on the job. Juan was at home with his wife Elena, who is pregnant. They looked happy and were joking with each other. Then, back to the prison scene, Juan follows Mala Madre and Apache and advises them not to break all the cameras so they can be used for negotiations. Juan suggested they just cover the camera. Mala Madre apparently liked the idea. In the guard room, the officers saw Juan and Mala Madre from CCTV. They watched when Juan finally covered the camera lens. The officers realized that Juan was pretending to be a prisoner and made sure that no one found out about his lies. In the cell, another officer has apparently been caught by the prisoners. Mala Madre brought Juan to the officer and showed how they threatened and then beat him. After that, the SWAT team has arrived and surrounded the prison to directly enter and paralyze the prisoners. But at that time, officers realized there was a special prisoner in cell number 4, which not much is known about. The detainees belonged to a Basque terrorist group linked to ETA. Mala Madre apparently found out about the important prisoners and brought them out of the cell inside the prison. Mala Madre confronts the Basque prisoners on CCTV cameras linked to prison officials, informing them that they have 3 important prisoners hostage, besides a prison officer. Meanwhile, prison officials and leaders are trying to uncover how the rebellion occurred, including how Mala Madre found out about the special prisoner in cell number 4. Mala Madre asks Juan to write down their requests, one of which asks to get rid of the prison leader named Maligno. In addition, they asked for a doctor's examination not to go through the prison bars, which caused a prisoner to be diagnosed with diarrhea when he had cancer. Negotiations began. The prison leader tries to negotiate with Mala Madre as the prisoner's leader. After asking for the CCTV cameras to be reopened, prison officials could spy on a door to cell 225, which was guarded by Apache and Tachuela, Mala Madre's accomplice. Apache asks Tachuela if Juan, the new prisoner, can be trusted. Apparently, Apache had his suspicions and intended to keep an eye on Juan. A prison leader comes to negotiate with Mala Madre and Juan. While checking on the negotiator, Juan whispers that the hostage is in the bathroom. Juan gives them a letter with their request, and the prison leader asks to see the hostages to confirm their condition. But Mala Madre refused and just made sure they would be fine. Then he asked for a lot of food because the prisoners would be in prison for some time for the rebellion. In addition, Mala Madre asked Juan to speak with his wife, Elena. The prison leader then asked Juan to come with him so he could use the phone. But just before they stepped out of the prison door, a scream made Mala Madre take the prison leader hostage. Apparently, the screams occurred because of the death of one of the prisoners. The SWAT team tried to enter the prison because they thought one of the hostages was dead. Juan attempts to bring the 3 hostages into the front of the camera to stop the SWAT team's attempts to enter the prison. The attempt was successful, and the prisoners cheered Juan and Mala Madre. On the other hand, the rebellion in prison apparently attracted the attention of other terrorist groups, especially with the false news that one of the ETA members had died. While in prison, Armando receives a call from Elena, who is worried about Juan's condition, but Armando confirms that Juan is fine. The scene moves back to when Juan is about to leave for work. Elena had apparently asked Juan not to go to prison because he would only officially be working the next day. But Juan insisted on making a good impression on other co-workers and went anyway. Remembering their togetherness, Elena went to prison. Juan tries to blend in with Mala Madre's group in prison even though Apache still has suspicions about him. Juan secretly took the walkie-talkie belonging to the officer left in the middle of the rebellion and tried to contact the security office to tell the hostage's position in cell number 219. Almanza received Juan's call and confirmed that Elena was okay, even proud of Juan's actions. Meanwhile, the prisoners knew that there had been rebellions in other prisons because of their actions. They saw footage of their families being interviewed on television. It was then that Mala Madre searched for the walkie-talkie that Juan had stolen. Juan realized this and quickly returned the walkie-talkie, arguing that he had kept it from being taken by other prisoners. Apache apparently has a secret cell phone that he uses to contact the security room officers and investigate Juan. Elena arrives outside the prison with the families of the other prisoners, and she wants to meet Armando to find out Juan's condition. Meanwhile, Armando knows that the prison leader, Utrilla, beats an officer to get information about the rebellion. Armando knows that Utrilla himself disseminated information about ETA prisoners in prison until Mala Madre found out. Riots occurred outside the prison, and the prisoners' families threw stones at the officers because they did not receive information about the condition of the prisoners trapped in the rebellion. The issue of the death of one of the prisoners made the situation even more heated. The prisoners inside the prison watched the riots outside on television. Almanza communicated with Mala Madre and ensured that things would be fine, although it was clear that the rioting was heating up. On the other hand, Juan watches the riots on television and sees Elena trying to get out of the riots. Juan requests a walkie-talkie from Mala Madre and calls Almanza to stop the rioting to save Elena. However, Almanza actually cut off the television channel inside the prison. Meanwhile, Elena was pushed in the middle of the riot until she finally fell. Because one of the officers hit Elena, she is in an emergency at the hospital. Inside the prison, Mala Madre asks for a list of riots victims outside and asks about Elena's condition. Almanza ensured that Elena was fine, but Juan insisted on talking to her. Almanza then advised Juan to get out and go to the hospital, but Mala Madre refused. Mala Madre only threatened that they would be more of a mess if anything happened to the people out there. When Juan is worried about Elena, Apache comes to him and forces him to reveal his identity. But Juan turned things around and wanted to reveal that Apache were spies for prison officials. They then made a deal for Apache to find out what was going on outside, and Juan would give the paper proof that the Apaches were spies. Meanwhile, Juan and Mala Madre grew closer. They talked about each other's lives and families, including Mala Madre's children. After seeing the list of victims, Mala Madre couldn't believe it and intended to kill the hostage. Juan tries to convince Mala Madre not to kill the hostage and just cuts off their ear. Tachuela then ordered Juan to cut off the hostage's ear, which Juan did. The earpieces were sent to prison officials. Mala Madre finally gets a list of riot victims outside the prison and knows that Elena is in critical condition after being beaten by an officer. Juan asks to meet the officer, who turns out to be Utrilla. Juan beats Utrilla and insists on finding out what happened to Elena. Finally, Juan found out that Elena and the child she was carrying had died. The prisoners beat Utrilla badly after hearing that. But Utrilla reveals that Juan is a prison officer and forces him to tell the truth. Hearing this, Juan then kills Utrilla. In the prison cell, Juan sees the prisoners' reality and their reasons for the rebellion, and he decides to fully join the prisoners. A negotiator was sent by the president to negotiate with Mala Madre and Tachuela. But just then, Juan came with Utrilla's body. Juan negotiated for officials and the government to make an agreement in public so they wouldn't be able to deny it, and he asked the president to speak live on television about the deal. Juan's actions apparently displeased Mala Madre. Mala Madre threatens Juan, but he insists that he did the right thing. Almanza, on the other hand, attempted to communicate with Mala Madre and asked him to retrieve a document. The document contains Juan's identity, revealing him as a prison officer. Even so, Mala Madre did not believe it and believed that it was just a trick of the officers to make him kill Juan. Almanza later revealed that Juan was not the only insider officer in prison, and he offered freedom to Mala Madre. Tachuela and Apache try to convince Mala Madre to get rid of Juan, but again, Mala Madre insists on believing in him. The prisoners prepared weapons for a larger uprising attempt. One of the injured hostages is in critical condition inside the cell due to heavy blood loss. Mala Madre finally met Juan alone and had a conversation. Mala Madre says that if the SWAT team goes in and doesn't agree to the deal, then one of them must die. Mala Madre takes it as punishment for Juan's betrayal, and whatever happened, he made sure Juan wouldn't come out alive. The president appeared on television, and the prisoners thought their request had been agreed upon. Unexpectedly, Apache kills the prisoner guarding the hostage. A SWAT team breaks in, and Juan asks Mala Madre to kill the hostage. Prisoners fight against SWAT teams, even though the prison is easily besieged. Juan runs to kill the hostages, but is instead shot in the back by Apache. As he is dying, Apache aims fire at Mala Madre. Juan and Mala Madre die when the SWAT team gets into prison. The closing scene shows Armando entering the prison as the bodies of the prisoners who were victims of the rebellion are brought out. Armando saw Juan's body, and Tachuela is dead, but Mala Madre was still alive, while Apache was secured by officers. Armando goes into cell 211 and finds Juan's wedding ring and the writing on the wall that he died here. The moral that can be learned from this movie is, prison system can be so bad that prisoners are forced to rebel to receive humane treatment. In addition, Juan's love for his wife is so commendable.